I watched Brenda's sleek sedan pull away, her Realtor of the Year bumper sticker glinting under the pale morning sun. She'd kissed me goodbye with that practiced, knowing smirk, a look that always made me feel like an outdated listing. Later, at the urgent care, a nurse's eyes told me my world was about to be condemned. "There's only one way this happens," she murmured, a judgment sharper than any blade. Dale Miller begins his Monday with Brenda's unsettling realtor voice and smirk. At work, Dale experiences severe pain and greenish discharge at the urinal, leading him to scream. His supervisor, Tom Davis, checks on him and insists he seeks immediate medical attention. Dale decides to go to an urgent care clinic instead of his regular doctor. A nurse's cold stare makes Dale increasingly uneasy during his wait. Dar Anderson delivers the shocking diagnosis of a nasty case of gonorrhea. Dale adamantly denies infidelity, stating Brenda is his only partner. Anderson explains Brenda could be asymptomatic and needs to be tested. Dale calls Tom Davis, who offers a leave of absence and promises to keep the situation discreet. Dale then makes a difficult call to his parents, Frank and Betty Miller, struggling to explain his need to talk without revealing the truth. Memories of his strict, religious Midwestern upbringing regarding sex before marriage resurface. He recalls Brenda's promise to rock his world after he told her he wanted to wait until marriage. Their family life is described. Brenda's success as a realtor, their two daughters, Sarah and Katie, and Brenda having her tubes tied. Brenda's increasing work schedule and persistent realtor persona have become a source of irritation and distance. Despite Brenda's changes, Dale never suspected infidelity, given his strong personal stance against it. Dale arrives at his parents' house, where he is greeted by Frank and Betty, and they prepare for a serious discussion after a family prayer. Dale confesses his diagnosis to his parents, who react with quiet shock, but unwavering belief in his faithfulness. Monday morning began, like most others, with the low hum of our coffee maker and the clinking of Dale Miller's cereal spoon against the bowl. Brenda, already dressed for the day, stood by the kitchen island, adjusting her scarf. Her voice, crisp and professional, the one she used to close deals, cut through the quiet. "Another big day, honey. Remember, that Smith property is a hot lead." She leaned over for a quick kiss, her lips cool. Her smile, tight and knowing, followed me out the door. It was the same smirk I'd seen 1,000 times, but today it carried a strange weight, a cold premonition that settled deep in my gut. At the office, the fluorescent lights of the men's room offered no comfort. Standing at the urinal, the familiar morning ritual turned into something sharp and ugly. An agonizing pain shot through me, like running a blade up from the inside. I gasped, then a cry tore itself from my throat as I saw the disturbing greenish discharge. My hands instinctively clutched the porcelain, my knuckles white. A choked scream escaped me. Tom Davis, my supervisor, a decent man with a thick head of gray hair, rushed in. His brow was furrowed with concern. "Dale, everything all right in here?" He saw me doubled over, the grim evidence undeniable. "My God, Dale, you need to get to a doctor. Now, I'll cover your calls. Don't even think about coming back today." His voice was firm but kind. I nodded, grateful for his quick thinking, and stumbled it out. My regular family doctor was too personal, too close. I needed anonymity. I drove to an urgent care clinic on the edge of town, a sterile building with chipped paint in the waiting room. The nurse behind the counter looked at me with a practiced, detached gaze, her eyes cold as she handed me a clipboard. She'd seen it all before, a quiet judgment in her expression. The wait felt endless. When my name was finally called, I walked down a stark hallway to a small examination room. Dr. Anderson, a woman with tired eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, did not mince words. She laid out the facts, clinical and precise. "Mr. Miller, you have a rather nasty case of gonorrhea." The words hung in the air, heavy and solid. I stared at her, stunned. "No, that's impossible," I mumbled, my voice thin. I'm not." I couldn't even form the denial. She listened patiently, then cut in. "You insist you haven't been intimate with anyone other than your wife, Brenda." It wasn't a question. "Only one person," I confirmed, my voice gaining a little strength. "Brenda is the only woman I've ever been with." Dr. Anderson nodded slowly. Your wife could be asymptomatic. She'll need to be tested. The implication was a gut punch. I called Tom Davis from the parking lot. His voice, when he answered, was still laced with concern. I explained, leaving out the specifics, that I had a medical issue requiring time off. "Take as long as you need, Dale," he said, his voice reassuring. "Your job will be here. And don't worry, this stays between us." His discretion was a small comfort in the growing storm. The next call was harder. I dialed my parents' number, the digits familiar, a lifeline I suddenly needed more than ever. My mother, Betty, answered, her voice warm and steady. "Dale, honey, is everything all right?" I struggled to find the words, to explain the urgency without unleashing the devastating truth over the phone. "Mom, Dad, I need to come over. I need to talk to you in person." As I drove, the familiar Midwestern landscape blurred past, the cornfields stark against the winter sky. Memories of my upbringing flooded my mind. Frank and Betty Miller, good, God-fearing people. Our house, filled with quiet prayers and Sunday sermons. Sex before marriage was a strict no-no, an unspoken commandment stronger than any written law. I remembered telling Brenda all those years ago that I wanted to wait. Her deep kiss, her eyes sparkling. "I promise I'll rock your world, Dale Miller," she'd whispered. And she had. Brenda became a whirlwind, a successful realtor who seemed to glide through open houses and closings with effortless charm. We had Sarah, then Katie, my daddy's girls, as I called them. Brenda had her tubes tied after Katie's difficult birth, a pragmatic decision for our family. Life had been good, settled. But over the past few years, Brenda's work had consumed her. More evenings, more weekends, week-long seminars in Chicago or St. Louis. Her realtor persona, that polished, knowing version of herself, started bleeding into our home life. It had become a constant irritation, a barrier between us. Both Sarah and Katie had noticed too, asked why Mommy was always working. I never suspected infidelity, not really. How could I? I'd always been so clear about my beliefs, my deep-seated convictions about marriage and fidelity. Brenda knew my stance. Finally, I pulled into my parents' gravel driveway. Frank, my father, was already on the porch, his hand raised in a familiar greeting. He wrapped me in a tight hug, his presence solid and unwavering. Inside, Betty poured coffee, her movements calm, efficient. "Let's say a prayer first, son," Frank suggested, his eyes gentle, sensing the weight I carried. We bowed our heads, and in that moment, in their quiet, loving home, I felt a flicker of strength. After the amen, the silence stretched, thick with unspoken questions. I took a deep breath, the coffee steaming between my hands. "I just came from the urgent care clinic," I began, my voice raspy. "I have gonorrhea." Frank's eyes widened slightly. Betty let out a small, sharp intake of breath. Their faces, etched with quiet shock, remained fixed on me. And then, Frank spoke, his voice low, firm. "Dale, we know you. We know your heart. You wouldn't do that." His belief, unshakable, was a silent accusation against someone else entirely. Frank firmly affirms Dale's faithfulness amidst the shock. Betty asked Dale about his plans, leading him to declare his intention to divorce Brenda. Betty expresses concern for their daughters, Sarah and Katie, but Dale believes they are old enough to grasp the betrayal. Dale states he cannot trust Brenda, even with promises of change, and Frank supports his decision to divorce. Frank steps away to call Carol Jensen, Dale's sister, for family support. Betty reassures Dale while he waits for Frank to return. Dale leaves his parents' house feeling strengthened for the impending confrontation with Brenda. Brenda arrives home, still projecting her upbeat realtor persona, unaware of what awaits her. Dale immediately confronts her with the cold revelation. "I went to the urgent care today. I have gonorrhea." Brenda's initial reaction is one of pale denial, attempting to deflect the accusation. Dale presents the doctor's pamphlet and prescription, explaining the undeniable proof of her infidelity. Brenda's composure crumbles, and she breaks down, confessing to someone else. Dale, feeling numb, presses for the identity of the other man, who she reluctantly reveals as Chad, a colleague. Brenda admits the affair began over a year ago during one of her seminars, deeply shocking Dale. Dale asks if she ever loved him, to which Brenda tearfully claims she still does, calling it a mistake. but her words feel hollow. Dale, his voice devoid of emotion, tells her he wants a divorce, ignoring her pleas and apologies. Dale insists Brenda leave the house for the night, and she departs, defeated, after gathering a few belongings. My father, Frank, sat across from me, his eyes steady. Son, we know you. We know what you stand for. His voice was low, carrying the weight of years spent on the farm, a testament to hard work and honesty. There's no way you'd bring this on yourself. Betty, my mother, reached across the table, her hand resting on my arm. So what are you planning to do, Dale? She asked, her voice softer but equally firm. I looked at them both, the silent strength they offered filling me. I don't see any other option, I said, the words feeling foreign and heavy on my tongue. I have to divorce her over this. Betty's expression softened with worry. But what about Sarah and Katie, honey? This will break their hearts. I know it will be hard, I replied, the thought of my girls twisting in my gut. But they're old enough, they'll understand. A betrayal like this, there's no coming back from it. No way I can let it go, I continued, explaining the cold logic that had solidified in my mind. Even if she promised to change, even if she swore on a stack of Bibles, how could I ever trust her word again? Every late night, every seminar, every phone call would be a fresh suspicion. Frank nodded slowly, his gaze meeting mine. Adultery, he stated, his voice quiet but resolute, is a valid reason for divorce, son, biblically and legally. His words, simple and direct, offered a profound sense of validation. Frank pushed his chair back. I'm going to call Carol, he said, already moving towards the phone in the hallway. Carol Jensen, my older sister, was a rock, a strong source of family support, always ready with a practical solution or a sharp word of comfort. Left alone with Betty, she just sat with me, occasionally patting my arm, her presence a silent reassurance that I wasn't alone. The drive home was a blur of bare trees and gray fields. The support from my parents had solidified my resolve, replacing the initial shock with a cold, clear determination. My gut clenched with a sense of dread, but also a strange, steely calm. I had to face Brenda. The confrontation was inevitable. I pulled into the driveway just as Brenda's sedan turned the corner. She parked, her movements brisk and practiced, grabbing her briefcase from the passenger seat. As she walked toward the front door, she still had on that bright, upbeat realtor persona, a smile plastered on her face, oblivious to the impending storm. She swung open the door, her eyes bright. Hey, honey, how was your day? I closed on the Henderson place, finally. Her words, cheerful and light, grated against the heavy truth I carried. I stood in the living room, hands shoved into my pockets, my jaw tight. There was no gentle way to do this. I went to the urgent care today, I said, my voice flat, devoid of any warmth. Her smile faltered slightly. Oh, everything all right? Just a cold? She asked, her brow furrowing with feigned concern. I looked her directly in the eye, letting the words hang in the air, cold and hard. I have gonorrhea. Her face went pale, a sudden draining of color that left her features stark. Her eyes, usually so animated, became wide with something like terror. What? That's impossible. Dale, what are you talking about? Are you accusing me? Her voice rose, laced with a frantic, defensive edge, trying to turn the accusation back on me, to deflect. I pulled out the folded pamphlet from the doctor, the prescription slip still tucked inside. I laid them on the coffee table between us. The doctor explained it clearly, Brenda. There's only one way I could have gotten this. I haven't been with anyone but you, and I know I haven't. My voice was steady, unyielding. There was no escape for her, no room for denial. Her bravado crumbled. The carefully constructed facade of the successful realtor, the cheerful wife, shattered. Her lips began to tremble, and tears welled in her eyes, blurring them. She shook her head, a small, choked sound escaping her throat. Dale, I'm so sorry. There was someone else. A wave of nausea washed over me, but I kept my voice even. Who, Brenda? I asked, my voice numb with shock. She wrapped her arms around herself, rocking slightly. It's Chad, she whispered, her voice barely audible. From the office, Chad Jenkins. My mind reeled. Chad, The younger guy, all slicked back hair and easy charm, who always joked with the Brenda at office parties. How long, I managed to ask, the words tasting like ash. She sobbed, her confession coming in broken pieces. It started over a year ago. During one of the seminars in Chicago, it was just one time. Then it wasn't. It just kept happening. Over a year. The truth hit me like a physical blow, a year of lies, of knowing glances, of calculated deception. Did you ever love me, Brenda? I asked, the question escaping before I could stop it. Her response was immediate, desperate. Yes, I still love you, Dale. It was a mistake. A terrible, horrible mistake. Please, we can fix this. Her pleas and apologies were empty, hollow sounds to me. The words held no weight, no meaning. I want a divorce, Brenda, I said, my voice flat, without inflection. The bedrock of our marriage, the foundation built on trust and shared history, was shattered, irrevocably broken. Her protests, her attempts to reach for me, were met with an unyielding stare. I can't be in the same house with you tonight, I told her, my voice cold, pushing away her hand. You need to go. Defeated, she nodded, her shoulders slumped. She walked to our bedroom, gathered a few things into a small bag, her movements slow and heavy. I heard the muffled click of her car door, then the crunch of tires on the gravel as she drove away, leaving behind a silence that was colder than any winter night. Dale endures a sleepless night, overwhelmed by pain and betrayal, worried about his daughters. With Frank's help, Dale contacts Mr. Jenkins, a reputable divorce attorney. The next morning, Brenda returns briefly for more belongings, attempting to talk, but Dale remains cold and distant. Sarah and Katie ask about their mother's absence, and Dale deflects, promising an explanation soon. Mr. Jenkins advises Dale on divorce grounds, custody, and asset division, highlighting the harsh realities. Dale begins to calculate the significant financial burden of a second household and legal fees. Brenda attempts reconciliation through calls and texts, promising therapy and change, but Dale ignores her. Whispers about the separation spread through their small town, bringing Dale feelings of judgment and pity. Tom Davis offers Dale emotional support and understanding, reminding him he's not alone. Dale confides fully in his sister, Carol Jensen, who is angered by Brenda's actions and offers practical help with the girls. Brenda's affair with Chad becomes common knowledge at her real estate office, creating a toxic atmosphere, with Chad also scrutinized. Dale returns to Dr. Anderson for a follow-up, confirming the infection is clearing, though emotional pain persists. Brenda is served with divorce papers, reacting with a mix of renewed desperation, anger, and defensiveness. Sarah, perceptive and older, notices Dale's sadness in Brenda's absence, forming her own conclusions. Dale strives for normalcy, reading bedtime stories to Katie, trying to preserve their fractured family life. The house felt too large, too quiet, filled with the echo of Brenda's confession. I spent a torturous night alone, the silence amplifying the sharp edges of my pain, the crushing weight of betrayal. Every creak of the old floorboards, every gust of wind against the windows, seemed to carry a whisper of what had been lost. My mind fixated on Sarah and Katie, their innocent faces, just unaware of the chasm that had opened beneath their lives. The next morning, with the pale light of dawn barely visible, I called my father. He'd already found a name. Mr. Jenkins, a local divorce attorney known for his direct, no-nonsense approach. He'll tell you straight, son, Frank had said. I made the appointment, my voice flat, almost robotic. Brenda returned later that day, her face drawn, her eyes red-rimmed. She moved through the house like a ghost, collecting more of her belongings. She tried to talk, her voice pleading, Dale, please, can we just talk about this? But I maintained a cold, distant demeanor. My answers were clipped, my gaze unwavering from the window. There was nothing left to say. The time for talking had passed. The girls, Sarah and Katie, noticed the emptiness, the missing presence. Where's Mom? Sarah asked, her brow furrowed as I made them toast for breakfast. Katie, younger, simply looked around, her eyes searching. She's away for a little while, girls, I managed, my voice strained. I'll explain everything soon, I promise. The lie tasted bitter. Mr. Jenkins' office was precisely what I expected. Dark wood, framed law degrees, and a quiet sense of authority. He listened without interruption as I laid out the bare facts, the diagnosis, Brenda's confession. His advice was pragmatic, a harsh reality check. He outlined the grounds for divorce based on adultery, the complexities of child custody, and the painful process of asset division. "It won't be easy, Mr. Miller," he said, his voice measured, "but you have a clear case." I left his office with a stack of papers and a heavy sense of dread. The financial implications began to settle in. A second household, new school arrangements, legal fees mounting like a wall. The future of my children, their college funds, their stability, it all felt suddenly precarious. Brenda's attempts to reconcile began almost immediately. Calls, texts, voice messages filled with desperate apologies. "Please, Dale, let's go to therapy. I'll do anything. I made a mistake." I read them, listened to them, but left them unanswered. The words felt empty, devoid of true understanding. The thought of her touching me after everything made my skin crawl. It wasn't long before the whispers started. Our small town, like most Midwestern communities, was a tight-knit place where news traveled fast, especially the bad kind. I felt the weight of judgment and pity in grocery store aisles, in the brief, averted glances of neighbors. Real estate gossip, it seemed, was particularly hard to contain. Tom Davis, true to his word, checked in often. "How are you doing, Dale?" he'd ask, his voice genuinely concerned. "You're not alone in this, you know." His quiet support was a lifeline. He understood that some wounds ran deeper than any physical ailment. I confided fully in Carol, my sister. Her reaction was immediate and fierce. "That lying snake," she'd spat, her voice tight with fury. "Don't you dare let her walk all over you, Dale." She offered practical help, promising to take the girls for weekends, to be there for them. Her anger, though raw, was a comfort. The ripple effect of Brenda's actions spread. The affair with Chad became an open secret at her real estate office. Conversations hushed when she walked by. Chad, I heard, was also facing scrutiny, his easy charm now seen as something more predatory. The office, once her domain of success, had become a toxic environment. I returned to Dr. Anderson for a follow-up. She confirmed the infection was clearing, prescribed a final course of antibiotics. The physical pain, the burning and discharge, subsided, but the emotional pain remained, a dull ache that seemed to reside just beneath my ribs. A week later, a process server handed Brenda the divorce papers. I wasn't there, but the message she left me was a whirlwind of renewed desperation, anger, and defensiveness. "You can't do this, Dale. You're going to ruin everything." Her words, once again, bounced off a wall of my hardened resolve. Sarah, older and more perceptive, started piecing things together. She saw my sadness, the quiet way I moved through the house, the empty space Brenda had left. She didn't ask direct questions anymore, but her eyes held a new understanding, a disquieting recognition of the fractured world around her. In the evenings, I tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy for Katie, reading her bedtime stories, her small hand warm in mine. These were the fragments I held on to, the quiet moments that reminded me what I was fighting for. Dale gently explains the divorce to Sarah and Katie, attributing it to Mommy's choices. Sarah, understanding the implication, bursts into tears and asks if her mother cheated, which Dale confirms. Katie, younger, is confused and scared, asking about Brenda's living situation and future visits. Dale is heartbroken witnessing his daughter's amplified pain. Brenda's visit to the girls is strained. Sarah remains withdrawn, and Katie clings to Dale. Dale learns that Chad, Brenda's colleague, has been quietly terminated from the real estate agency. Mr. Jenkins begins drafting custody arrangements, with Dale seeking full custody due to Brenda's actions. Brenda, through her attorney, fights for shared custody and a significant portion of assets. Sarah's school performance declines, and she becomes withdrawn, showing signs of emotional distress. Katie starts experiencing nightmares, waking up distressed and calling for both parents. Dale struggles with exhaustion, juggling work, household duties, and caring for his grieving daughters. Frank and Betty intervene, offering to take the girls for weekends, providing a stable, loving environment. Carol offers practical assistance with groceries, school runs, and emotional support to Dale. Brenda attempts to curry favor with the girls by promising special trips, but her efforts seem self-serving. Despite Brenda's attempts, Sarah and Katie instinctively remained loyal to Dale, sensing his sincerity. The day for the conversation arrived, heavy and unavoidable. I sat Sarah and Katie down on the living room sofa, the same sofa where Brenda and I used to read them bedtime stories. The sunlight, usually cheerful, cast long, somber shadows. "Girls," I began, my voice thick, "Mommy and I are going to get a divorce." Their young faces, so bright just moments before, fell. "It's because of Mommy's choices," I added, trying to be gentle, yet honest. Sarah, perceptive at 10, immediately understood. Her eyes, usually full of youthful spark, welled up. "Is it because Mom cheated?" she asked, her voice cracking. I looked away for a second, then met her gaze, a heavy nod my only confirmation. She burst into tears, a raw, wrenching sound that tore at my chest. Katie, only 7, was more confused than heartbroken, more scared than angry. "Where will Mommy live?" she whispered, her small hand reaching for mine. "Will we still see her?" Her questions, so innocent, twisted the knife in my already wounded heart. I watched their pain, a mirrored grief of my own, but amplified by their innocence, by the knowledge that their world was shattering because of someone else's actions. Brenda's visits to the house, now sporadic, were always strained. The atmosphere in the living room would thicken, heavy and awkward. Sarah would retreat, her eyes downcast, offering only monosyllabic answers. Katie, usually so bubbly, would cling to my side, her small hand firmly in mine, her head buried in my hip. Brenda's attempts at forced cheerfulness fell flat. Word reached me through the quiet channels of the town grapevine. Chad, Brenda's colleague, had been quietly let go from the real estate agency, a hushed dismissal, no doubt to avoid a larger scandal. It offered little satisfaction, only a grim confirmation of the messy repercussions. Mr. Jenkins, my attorney, began drafting the custody arrangements. My resolve was firm. I wanted full custody. Brenda's actions, her proven infidelity, her current instability. I believe they made her unfit to be the primary parent. The girls needed stability, a constant. Brenda, however, was not going down quietly. Through her own attorney, a sleek woman from the city, she fought back, demanding shared custody, equal time, and a significant portion of our marital assets. The legal battle, it seemed, would be as bitter as the emotional one. The strain on the girls became increasingly visible. Sarah's grades, usually impeccable, began to slip. She was withdrawn at school, her teachers calling to express concern. Her usually neat handwriting became messy, her answers in class sparse. The emotional turmoil was etching itself onto her everyday life. Katie, meanwhile, started having nightmares. She'd wake up crying in the middle of the night, calling out for Mommy and Daddy together. I'd find myself sitting on the edge of her bed, stroking her hair, trying to soothe a fear that ran deeper than any monster under the bed. I was exhausted, juggling my job, trying to keep the house running, cooking meals that nobody really wanted to eat, and caring for my 2 grieving daughters. The immense strain pulled at my patience, at my very spirit. Every day felt like walking through thick mud. Frank and Betty, my parents, noticed. "Bring the girls over for the weekend, son," Frank suggested. "They need some time away from all this. We'll give them some good, solid country air." Their home, steady and loving, became a sanctuary, a place where the girls could simply be children again, surrounded by unwavering love. Carol, my sister, stepped in too. She'd show up with bags of groceries or offer to do a school run when I was caught up at work. She'd just sit with me, listening without judgment, her presence a sturdy, reassuring force. "You're doing good, Dale," she'd say, her hand on my shoulder. "Just keep going." Brenda, in her own misguided way, tried to win the girls over. She'd promised them special trips, new toys, expensive clothes. "Mommy misses you so much," she'd coo, her voice saccharine over the phone. But her efforts felt hollow, self-serving. It wasn't about them, it was about her own guilt, her own desperate need for validation. Despite her attempts, Sarah and Katie instinctively leaned on me. They sensed my unwavering presence, my sincerity, my quiet efforts to keep their world from collapsing entirely. They knew who was holding things together. They knew who was truly there for them. Dale and Brenda, accompanied by their lawyers, began the tense and frustrating mediation process. Brenda demands half of all assets, including Dale's retirement savings, despite her infidelity. Dale, following Mr. Jenkins' advice, refuses to concede on major points due to the adultery. Brenda's professional reputation suffers, leading to declining sales and avoidance from other realtors. Brenda becomes increasingly isolated, shunned by old friends and acquaintances in their community. Dale receives unexpected support and sympathy from colleagues and even strangers aware of his situation. Dale confronts Chad in town, exchanging a silent, venomous stare but maintaining his composure for the girl's sake. Mr. Jenkins prepares Dale thoroughly for court, meticulously reviewing the details of the affair's discovery. Brenda fluctuates between expressing remorse and righteous anger, feeling unjustly penalized. During a mediation session, Brenda lashes out at Dale, blaming him for her unhappiness. Dale, though hurt, maintains his composure, his Midwestern stoicism acting as a shield against Brenda's attacks. Sarah's school performance continues to decline, and both her piano lessons and Katie's soccer practices are neglected. Brenda faces severe financial strain, struggling to find new employment, and her real estate income drastically drops. The case proceeds to court, where the formidable judge attentively listens to the adultery charges. Medical records confirming Dale's STD are presented, serving as irrefutable evidence against Brenda. The mediation sessions began in a sterile conference room, the air thick with unspoken animosity. Brenda sat across from me, her lawyer, a sharp-faced woman in a tailored suit, at her side. Mr. Jenkins, calm and steady, was beside me. The process was tense, frustrating, a legal dance around a wound that refused to heal. Brenda, despite her confession, insisted on half of everything. Her lawyer laid out her demands: half of our equity, half of my retirement savings, spousal support. It felt like a blatant disregard for her own actions, a calculated attempt to profit from her betrayal. "We will not yield on these points, Mr. Miller," Mr. Jenkins stated, his voice firm, echoing my own convictions. "Given the adultery, we have a strong case for a more equitable division, and certainly for sole custody." My refusal was unwavering. I would not allow her to financially dismantle the life she had already emotionally destroyed. Brenda's professional life, once so vibrant, was in shambles. Her sales had plummeted. Other realtors, particularly the women, avoided working with her, their polite smiles barely concealing their judgment. The Realtor of the Year plaque, I imagined, now held a bitter irony. Her social isolation was just as stark. Old friends, women she'd shared coffee and gossip with for years, now looked away when they saw her in the grocery store. Acquaintances in the tight-knit community, who had once admired her ambition, now offered only cold shoulders. She was effectively an outcast. I, on the other hand, experienced an unexpected wave of sympathy. Colleagues at work would offer quiet words of support. Even strangers, who had likely heard the whispers, would give me a knowing, compassionate nod. It was a strange comfort, a silent acknowledgement that I was the wrong party. One afternoon, I spotted Chad, her former colleague, in town. He was at the hardware store buying some lumber. Our eyes met across the aisle. His face, once so smug, was now drawn, almost haggard. A silent, venomous stare passed between us. My hands clenched, but I held my peace. For Sarah and Katie, I would not descend to his level. Their innocence was already bruised enough. Mr. Jenkins began preparing me for court. We spent hours in his office, poring over every detail: the discovery of the affair, the timeline of her seminars, the emotional impact on the girls. He wanted every fact solid, every piece of evidence ready for presentation. Brenda, during this time, seemed to oscillate between fits of tearful remorse and bursts of righteous anger. "I'm being unfairly punished," she'd sob to her lawyer, or sometimes to me, during one of the few phone calls I'd begrudgingly taken. It was just a mistake. During one particularly heated mediation session, she turned on me. Her voice, usually so controlled, became shrill. "You're to blame for this, Dale. You were always so distant, so wrapped up in your perfect little life. I was unhappy." She flung the accusations at me, her face flushed. I felt the sting of her words, the injustice of it all, but I held my composure. My Midwestern stoicism, often a quiet burden, now served as a shield. I simply looked at her, my expression blank, refusing to engage with her desperate attempts to shift blame. It was a cold strength, born of profound disappointment. The girls continued to struggle. Sarah's piano lessons, once a joy, were now a chore, her fingers stumbling over familiar keys. Katie's soccer practices, which she had loved, were often missed. Her enthusiasm dimmed. They were adrift, and I saw it in their quietness, in their averted gazes. Brenda's financial situation worsened. She struggled to find a new job, her real estate career effectively dead in our small community. Her income dropped drastically, a consequence of her tarnished reputation. The financial stability she had once enjoyed was crumbling around her. The case finally moved to court. The courtroom was small, imposing, dominated by the judge, a formidable local figure named Judge Miller. He listened intently, his gaze stern as Mr. Jenkins presented the adultery charges. The weight of proof hung in the air. Then came the irrefutable evidence. The medical records confirming my STD diagnosis were presented to the court. The official documents, cold and clinical, laid bare the stark truth. There was no denying it, no twisting it. The facts were clear. Life's choices often carry a higher cost than we expect. Stick around to the end to see how Dale navigates the unfolding consequences. Brenda, coached by her lawyer, attempts to minimize her actions and portray Dale as controlling or neglectful. Dale's testimony is factual and delivered with a quiet sincerity that resonates in the courtroom. Frank Miller, Dale's father, testifies as a character witness, affirming Dale's strong morals and devotion. Chad's absence from court further solidifies Brenda's sole responsibility for the affair. Under cross-examination, Brenda falters, contradicts herself, and ultimately breaks down in tears. The judge's questions are sharp, highlighting the significant impact of Brenda's actions on the children and Dale. Sarah expresses her desire to live primarily with her father to a court-appointed counselor. Katie, with childlike innocence, tells the counselor she misses her old mom and dad. The judge deliberates for several days, indicating the case's complexity and seriousness. Dale waits anxiously, understanding the profound implications for his family and future. Brenda confronts the stark reality of potentially losing everything she believes she was due. The local newspaper reports on the high-profile divorce, detailing Brenda's actions. Dale feels no joy despite the impending victory, only a deep sense of loss and exhaustion. Tom Davis calls Dale, offering words of encouragement and affirmation as a good father. Brenda corners Dale outside the courthouse, delivering a final, tearful, and unconvincing apology. Brenda took the stand, her face carefully composed. Coached by her lawyer, she attempted to minimize her actions, painting a picture of a marriage fraught with emotional neglect. She implied I was controlling, stifling her ambition, forcing her into a corner where her mistake was an understandable lapse. Her voice, though trembling slightly, carried a practiced sincerity. My testimony, in contrast, was direct, factual. I spoke of routines, of trust, of the quiet expectation of fidelity in a marriage built on shared values. I described the pain, the shock, the cold reality of the diagnosis, the impact on my daughters. There was no histrionics, no raised voice, just a quiet sincerity that seemed to resonate through the courtroom. Then Frank, my father, took the stand as a character witness. His presence, solid and unwavering, spoke volumes. He described my upbringing, my devotion to my family, my steadfast moral character. Dale Miller is a good man, he stated, his voice clear. He always has been. He puts his family first. His words carried the weight of a lifetime of honest living. Chad, Brenda's accomplice, was conspicuously absent from court. He was never called to testify, never made an appearance. His absence solidified Brenda's sole responsibility, reinforcing the perception that she was the primary architect of the affair. Under cross-examination, Brenda's carefully constructed facade began to crack. Mr. Jenkins, relentless but polite, pressed her on inconsistencies, on the timeline of her affair versus her claims of neglect. She faltered, contradicting herself, her voice growing increasingly desperate. Eventually the tears came, not the controlled, rehearsed kind, but a genuine, wrenching breakdown that exposed her raw guilt. The judge, Judge Miller, watched it all with a stern, unblinking gaze. His questions, when he posed them, were pointed, direct. He focused on the impact of Brenda's actions, not just on me, but more importantly, on the children. He asked about the disruption, the emotional fallout, the broken trust. Sarah, my observant 10-year-old, was brought in to speak with a court-appointed counselor. She was quiet, composed, but her message was clear. She expressed her desire to live primarily with her father. It was a silent plea, a testament to where she felt stability and safety lay. Katie, my sweet 7-year-old, also spoke to the counselor. Her words were simple, innocent, yet devastating in their truth. She didn't understand all the legal intricacies, but she knew what she missed. "I just miss my old mom and dad," she told the counselor, her small voice full of longing. The judge took several days to deliberate. The waiting was excruciating. Every hour stretched. Every phone call from Mr. Jenkins filled me with a fresh wave of anxiety. The fate of my family, the future of my girls, my own financial stability, it all hung in the balance, suspended in the cold air of legal uncertainty. Brenda, I knew, was also agonizing. She faced the real possibility of losing everything she thought she was entitled to, her carefully constructed life crumbling around her. Her despair, I imagined, was as profound as my own. News travels fast in a small town. In the local newspaper, usually reserved for bake sale announcements and high school football scores, reported on the high-profile divorce case. Brenda's name, the specifics of the adultery, it was all there, laid bare for the entire community to see. The public judgment, once whispered, was now printed in black and white. Despite the impending victory, the thought of it brought me no joy. Only a profound sense of loss, a deep exhaustion that seeped into my bones. The fight had taken too much, stripped too much away. The silence of my empty bedroom, the quiet grief of my daughters, the fractured reality of our lives, these were the true come. One afternoon outside the courthouse, as I walked to my car, Brenda appeared, seemingly out of nowhere. Her eyes were red, her face streaked with tears. "Dale, please," she begged, her voice hoarse. "I'm so sorry. I know I messed up. Can't we try to fix this?" Her apology, desperate and tearful, felt hollow, too late, and utterly unconvincing. I simply walked past her, my gaze fixed ahead. There was nothing left to say. The judge grants the divorce on grounds of adultery, with significant implications for Brenda. Dale is awarded primary physical custody of Sarah and Katie, with Brenda receiving limited supervised visitation. Brenda receives a substantially smaller share of marital assets due to her infidelity and its impact. The judge rules against alimony for Brenda, citing her actions and self-inflicted diminished earning capacity. Brenda is ordered to pay child support, a difficult financial burden given her current state. Brenda erupts in anger in court, accusing the judge and Dale of ruining her life. Dale feels a quiet, profound relief, reassured of his daughter's safety and stability with him. Mr. Jenkins congratulates Dale, acknowledging his strength and integrity throughout the ordeal. Reporters swarm outside the courthouse, snapping photos and asking intrusive questions. Dale and his parents quickly retreat to their family home for solace and privacy. Dale gently explains the verdict to Sarah and Katie. Sarah understands Katie is simply happy to be with her dad. Brenda's isolation deepens. She makes a desperate call to Chad, receiving little comfort. Brenda loses her real estate license due to ethical violations related to her affair. Dale feels the first faint glimmer of hope, envisioning a path forward for himself and his daughters. Frank and Betty lead a heartfelt family prayer, expressing gratitude for Dale's strength and the children's future. The courtroom was silent, save for the hum of the ventilation system, as Judge Miller cleared his throat. He delivered the verdict with a precise, measured tone, each word a hammer blow in the quiet room. The divorce was granted on the grounds of adultery, a decision with significant implications for Brenda. Primary physical custody of Sarah and Katie was awarded to me. Brenda would have limited supervised visitation, a stark contrast to the shared life we once had. The judge cited the emotional stability I offered, the disruption Brenda's actions had caused, and Sarah's clear desire to live with me. Brenda received a significantly smaller share of the marital assets. The judge acknowledged the financial impact of her infidelity, the medical expenses, and the disruption it had caused to our family's stability. It was not half, not what she had demanded. There would be no alimony for Brenda. Judge Miller cited her actions and her diminished earning capacity as consequences of her own doing, not something the court would obligate me to support. He was clear. Her choices had led to this. Adding insult to injury, or perhaps justice, Brenda was ordered to pay child support, a bitter pill to swallow, given her rapidly deteriorating financial state, but a necessary provision for the children's welfare. Brenda, unable to contain herself, erupted. Her face flushed, her voice raw. She screamed, "This isn't fair. You're ruining my life, both of you." She glared at the judge, then at me, her anger a desperate, futile outburst against the inevitable. A bailiff stepped forward, but her lawyer quickly intervened, quieting her with a firm hand. I felt a quiet, profound relief wash over me, a release of tension that had coiled in my gut for months. My daughters would be safe, stable with me, my bum. That was all that truly mattered. Mr. Jenkins, my attorney, extended his hand. "Congratulations, Dale," he said, his grip firm. "You handled yourself with immense strength and integrity throughout this ordeal." His words were a small but significant comfort. Outside the courthouse, a small media frenzy awaited. Reporters armed with cameras and microphones swarmed us, snapping photos, shouting invasive questions. "Mr. Miller, how do you feel about the verdict?" "Ms. Miller, do you have a comment on the adultery charges?" My parents, Frank and Betty, were already there, waiting. We quickly retreated, slipping past the reporters to their car, seeking solace and privacy at their family home, away from the glare of public scrutiny. Later that evening, after the girls were settled, I gently explained the outcome to Sarah and Katie. Sarah, her brow furrowed, seemed to understand the implications, the finality of it all. Katie, simpler in her assessment, just seemed happy to be with her dad, her small hand finding mine. "We're staying with you, Daddy?" she asked, her eyes bright with hope. "Yes, honey," I confirmed, squeezing her hand. "Always." Brenda was left alone, the weight of the judgment crushing her. I heard, through the ever-present town grapevine, that she made a desperate call to Chad. He offered little comfort, having his own life to piece back together. The affair had cost them both dearly. The real estate board, citing ethical violations related to her affair impacting her professional conduct, revoked Brenda's license. Her career, her identity, was gone. The cost of her betrayal was mounting, far beyond anything she could have imagined. For the first time in months, I felt a faint glimmer of hope. The path forward was still uncertain, still challenging, but it was a path. A future where I could focus on my daughters, on rebuilding a life of stability and quiet integrity. Frank and Betty led a heartfelt family prayer that evening. Frank's voice, steady and strong, filled the living room. He gave thanks for my strength, for the children's future, for the justice that, however painful, had finally been served. It was a prayer of gratitude and of quiet, enduring hope. Dale, Sarah, and Katie settle into a new routine, with Dale determinedly embracing both parental roles. Sarah slowly re-engages with her music lessons, finding comfort and solace in playing the piano. Katie's nightmares cease, and her playful, energetic spirit gradually returns to the household. Brenda, unable to face the community, moves out of town and takes a low-paying job, her career destroyed. Brenda's visits with the girls are infrequent and awkward, often canceled due to her inability to cope. Dale's finances stabilize as he manages the household budget, free from Brenda's past extravagant habits. Dale cautiously attends a support group for divorced fathers, finding solidarity and shared understanding. Tom Davis remains a loyal friend, regularly inviting Dale and the girls over for Sunday dinners. Carol Jensen becomes an even more vital aunt figure, taking Sarah and Katie on enjoyable outings. Frank and Betty continue to provide a constant source of love and stability, their home a sanctuary. Dale reflects on the painful lessons learned, the fragility of trust in his own unexpected inner strength. Dale begins the process of forgiving himself for any perceived role in the marriage's breakdown, without excusing Brenda's actions. Sarah and Katie, though marked by their experiences, demonstrate remarkable resilience in adapting to their new family structure. Dale embodies the quiet strength and perseverance characteristic of a Midwestern man, prioritizing his children's welfare. The intense anger Dale felt towards Brenda gradually dissipates, replaced by a quiet acceptance of his new reality. Life, with a slow, deliberate cadence, began to settle into a new normal for me, Sarah, and Katie. The quiet hum of our home replaced the previous tension. I took on both parental roles, the cook, the chauffeur, the comforter, the disciplinarian, all with a quiet determination that surprised even myself. Every morning I packed lunches, braided hair, and tied shoelaces, my hands growing accustomed to the small rituals of solo parenthood. Sarah, though still reserved, slowly started to re-engage with her music lessons. The piano, which had gathered dust, now filled the house with tentative melodies. I'd hear her practicing, a quiet, focused sound that spoke of solace, of finding her own rhythm again. Katie's nightmares ceased. Her room, once filled with cries in the dark, was now quiet through the night. Her playful, energetic spirit, muted for so long, gradually returned. Her laughter, a bright, clear sound, once again echoed through the halls, a welcome balm to my weary soul. Brenda, unable to face the weight of public judgment and her own choices, moved out of town. She took a low-paying job in a different county, her once flourishing real estate career completely destroyed. The occasional whispers I heard were of her struggles, of a life diminished, a consequence of actions that had reverberated far beyond our small family. Her visits with the girls became infrequent, often awkward, and sometimes canceled altogether. She struggled to connect, her own inability to cope creating a new barrier between her and her daughters. The girls, in turn, began to view these visits as obligations rather than joys. My finances, once strained by the legal battle and the prospect of two households, began to stabilize. I managed the household budget with care, free from Brenda's past extravagant habits. The quiet discipline brought a sense of control, a foundation beneath our feet. Cautiously, I attended a support group for divorced fathers at the local community center. In that circle of men, sharing stories of lost trust and rebuilt lives, I found solidarity and a shared understanding that made the burden feel a little lighter. We were all navigating the wreckage, trying to find a way forward. Tom Davis remained a loyal friend. He'd often invite me and the girls over for Sunday dinners, his wife's hearty cooking and their boisterous children a welcome distraction from our quiet home. He never pried, just offered a steady, unwavering presence. Carol Jensen, my sister, became an even more vital aunt figure. She'd take Sarah and Katie on fun outings, to the county fair, to the big city museum, to see a movie. Her energy, her laughter, filled a void that I, as a father, couldn't quite fill alone. She was a bridge back to a sense of carefree joy for them. Frank and Betty, my parents, were a constant. Their home remained a sanctuary, a place of unconditional love and stability. The girls loved their visits, the smell of homemade pie, the familiar rituals of their grandparents' farm. It anchored them, grounded them in something immutable. I often found myself reflecting on the painful lessons learned, the fragility of trust, how easily it could shatter, and the immense strength I had found within myself, a wellspring I hadn't known existed. This quiet resilience, I realized, was the legacy of my Midwestern upbringing. The hardest part of healing was not forgiving Brenda. That seemed a distant, impossible task, but forgiving myself. For any part I might have played, any distance I might have allowed to grow, though I knew her choices were her own. It was a slow internal process, peeling back layers of guilt and self-recrimination. Sarah and Katie, though forever changed by the seismic shift in their young lives, showed remarkable resilience. They adapted, not without scars, but with a quiet strength that mirrored my own. They were building new memories, carving out a new path, together. I embodied the quiet strength and perseverance of a Midwestern man, focused singularly on my children's well-being. The intense anger I had felt towards Brenda, that burning fire in my gut, began to dissipate. It was replaced not by warmth, but by a quiet acceptance of my new reality, a landscape reshaped, but still standing. Brenda's life continues its downward spiral, marked by isolation, financial hardship, and the loss of her children's respect. Chad, her former lover, has completely severed ties, leaving Brenda to face the severe consequences alone. Brenda's appeal for more custody time is denied, reaffirming the court's original decision. Brenda grapples with the full, permanent damage her choices inflicted on her family and herself. Dale encounters a haggard-looking Brenda in a grocery store in a different town, and they avoid eye contact. Sarah, now older, acknowledges her mother's suffering, but expresses deep gratitude for Dale's unwavering presence. Katie, despite her past hurt, expresses a simple, empathetic wish for her mother to be happy. Dale achieves a profound sense of finality, shedding the burden of anger and betrayal, embracing a quiet resolve. Dale finds renewed purpose in his role as a single father, dedicated to creating a loving, stable home. The narrative concludes with Dale embodying the enduring Midwestern spirit of resilience, hard work, and family priority. The story emphasizes that actions inevitably carry significant moral consequences and a high price. Dale achieves a deep sense of peace through self-forgiveness and the release of bitterness. A hopeful yet sober outlook emerges for Dale, Sarah, and Katie as they navigate their shared future. The story reflects on life's unpredictability and the importance of navigating profound challenges with integrity. The final scene portrays Dale and his girls enjoying a quiet afternoon, a testament to their perseverance. Brenda's life continued its downward spiral, a predictable trajectory of consequences. The isolation, the financial hardship, the crushing weight of her children's lost respect. It all accumulated, leaving her a shadow of the vibrant, confident woman she once was. The once bright realtor of the year had faded into obscurity, a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones. Chad, her former lover, had completely disappeared. He'd cut ties, a clean, sharp break, leaving Brenda to face the full brunt of her choices alone. The brief, illicit connection had offered no loyalty, no lasting comfort, only temporary distraction and eventual abandonment. Brenda, in a last desperate attempt, appealed the custody arrangement. Her petition, however, was swiftly denied. The court's earlier decision, carefully considered and based on solid evidence, was reinforced. It was another stark reminder of the permanence of her actions, another door closed. She grappled with the full weight of her choices, the realization slowly dawning that the damage she inflicted on her family and ultimately on herself was permanent. There was no going back, no undoing the threads she had so carelessly unraveled. The price of her betrayal was being paid, in full. Months later, I saw Brenda in a grocery store in a town 20 miles over. She was pushing a cart, her hair unkempt, her clothes plain, her face gaunt. She looked up, our eyes met for a fleeting second, and then she quickly looked away, her gaze dropping to the floor. I did the same, a silent acknowledgement of a past we both carried, but a present we no longer shared. There was no anger, no triumph, just a quiet sadness and the instinct to avoid further pain. Sarah, now a teenager, had grown into a thoughtful, discerning young woman. She acknowledged her mother's suffering, the visible signs of her broken life, but her gratitude for my unwavering presence, for the stability I had provided, was evident. "You always did what was right, Dad," she'd said once, her words a quiet affirmation. Katie, still carrying a faint echo of hurt, now expressed a simple wish for her mother. "I hope Mom's happy," she'd murmured, her voice soft. It was not forgiveness, not fully, but a nascent empathy, a release from the bitterness that had once defined her confusion. For me, there was a profound sense of finality. I no longer carried the burden of anger or the sharp sting of betrayal. Those feelings had, with time and effort, transformed into a quiet resolve. My focus was clear: to nurture my daughters, to guide them, to create a home filled with love and stability. The emotional upheaval had settled, leaving a calm, if scarred, landscape. I found a new sense of purpose in my role as a single father. Every moment, every challenge, every small victory with Sarah and Katie reinforced my dedication. Creating a loving, stable home was no longer a duty, but a calling. The enduring spirit of the Midwest had seen me through. Resilience, hard work, and prioritizing family above all else. These were the values that had carried me forward. I had faced profound challenges, and with integrity, I had navigated them. The narrative of our lives underscored a fundamental truth: actions have consequences. Betrayal inevitably leads to a high price, paid not just by the betrayer, but by all those caught in the fallout. I achieved a profound sense of peace, having forgiven myself for any perceived failings and having released the bitterness that had once chained me to the past. This self-forgiveness was the truest form of freedom, a hopeful, albeit sober outlook now defining our days. Sarah, Katie, and I navigating life together, a small, strong unit. The future held its own uncertainties, but we would face them together. Life's unpredictability had taught me that, but it had also shown me the strength that lay within. On quiet afternoons, perhaps at a local park or in our backyard, I would watch Sarah and Katie growing, thriving. Their laughter, their small triumphs, a silent testament to our perseverance. A new dawn had indeed broken, slow and steady, over our Midwestern lives.